People of YouTube, today we're talking all about the Esquire. Whether you play guitar or you don't, most everyone has heard of the Fender Telecaster, right? But it didn't start as a Telecaster. And we're going to touch just a little bit of the history on that today. It all started with the Esquire. No, not that Esquire. This Esquire. Okay, not this one in particular. But the Esquire was first created in around 1949 to 1950-ish, in that range there that was being created. It didn't look exactly like this in 1949, but it did have a few similarities, right? But the control cavity was different. This whole straight piece right here, parallel to the bridge, that wasn't a thing. And the headstock looked different. Instead of 6 on the top, it was 3 and 3. And as we know now, in modern times, Fender really enjoys the 6 in a row on one side. But it didn't start out that way. It started with 3 and 3, 3 on top, 3 on bottom. And that would soon change. It was a quick change they made. And the Esquire was unveiled, believe it or not, at the NAMM show, according to my research. I didn't even know the NAMM show had been going on that long, so. Soon after that, Leo Fender and his team, I'm assuming there was a team, maybe it was just Leo, I don't know, I wasn't there. Listen, whatever, they sent out, they made 50 guitars, sold them, they all came back, okay? Because the necks started to warp on them under string tension. They were just wood, they didn't have truss rods in them. If you don't know what a truss rod is, it's I mean, you probably do if you're watching this channel, but if you don't, it's a steel rod typically that can be adjusted, and it can straighten a neck depending on how much string tension is on it. Okay, that's a rough explanation, but there you go. It didn't have that in it, so the necks began to warp. So they were like, how are we gonna fix this problem? So they fixed it with a truss rod. Okay, so they had that truss rod, and obviously it's way cheaper to not do it with a truss rod. Just do it without. You don't have to cut out the slot, you don't have to do all that kind of stuff, and it's much simpler. But you need that stability in a guitar neck with all this string tension. Once they're tuned to pitch, it's quite a bit of tension that the strings put on there, so you need that, okay? So they fixed that issue, and while they were at it, they were like, hey, why don't we just put a pickup close to the neck, right? We'll add a neck pickup right up here, and we'll call that the Broadcaster. This is not a full-blown lesson on the Telecaster history, okay? But I'm just touching the highlights so we can focus on the Esquire and the few unique things that it has going for it. But the 2 pickup configuration, right, that eventually became known as the Telecaster, was known as the Broadcaster. They had, by that time, changed the headstock to what we see today, and they changed this control panel to be like we see today down here. They called that the Broadcaster, and then, amongst other reasons, they got into a lawsuit with a company you may have heard of named Gretsch, right? I'm not saying this is the only reason, but according to my research, this is the main reason. Gretsch had a drum set named the Broadcaster, okay? So they couldn't use that name. So they had all these decals made, but this says Esquire. On a Telecaster, it says Telecaster. On the original Broadcasters, it said Broadcaster. So these were just decals, that were already made, and where it said broadcaster, they just cut the broad off because they couldn't use that name anymore. And they only made these for a short time, right? And those became known as no-casters. And then soon after that, it got marketed as the Telecaster, and that's the guitar that everyone knows and loves today, all right? But the Esquire, where does it fall in? It was the first one created, kind of as the prototype, then it soon became the Telecaster, and whatever happened to it? Well, I'm gonna let you know right now. Although the Esquire was made in 49 and 50-ish and was soon discarded because of the neck issues and all those things, it came back in 51. And the very first prototypes that we talked about in 49 and 50, they were made with a pine body, right? But then in 51, actually the Telecaster or the broadcasters, whatever, they started being made with ash. So when it came to 51 and the Esquire was being put in production again, all of these were made with ash. Through the years of production, there were some color variations. I know in 1957, there was a sunburst option, or at least a few of them were offered. But a lot of them were this color right here. Obviously this is faded over the years, but when they came out in 51 up until 55, they had a U-shaped neck, and in 56, that changed to a soft V, okay? And can you see it from this angle? I don't even think you can see it at all. Anyway, but you can feel it, right? There's a crease, a soft crease right in the middle down the neck, right? And so that's a soft V. In 57, this was replaced with a hard V, right? And that's much more pronounced. But in 56, it was a soft V, and this is what this is. It's a 1956 Esquire. This belongs to my dad. He bought it years ago, probably 20, 25 years ago. He bought it at a guitar show, but he loved the sound of it, and rightfully so. It's great at that whole twangy chicken picking thing. It just sounds great. Just one pickup, only one set of magnets that are pulling on the strings. You don't have a bunch of pickups. People argue all the time on the forums whether or not that actually affects tone. I don't know if it does or not, but I don't know if it can be scientifically proven. But this guitar in particular, I think, has that certain sound. Now, if you're not into country music, then you probably didn't make it past this first intro song. But if you're still hanging with me, then kudos, because I like that stuff too. I like it all. There's two kinds of music, country and western. Yeehaw! No, there's two kinds of music, good and bad, right? And I think there's something to learn from all of it, whether it's rock, country, blues, you name it, whatever it is, there's something to learn from it. Anyway, the Esquire was eventually discontinued in 1969 because it was just seen as a cheap Telecaster, a cheaper alternative, and the Telecaster was just winning by far on sales. They eventually discontinued this because not many people wanted it. They wanted the extra option of that front neck pickup. My favorite part about the Esquire is the wiring. I feel like it's pretty neat. It has one pickup, right? No modern day humbuckers where you're splitting the coils or tapping the coils, all those things. It has one single coil pickup, but yet it has a 3-switch selector. What does that do, you may ask? I'm gonna show you right now. This is how I recorded the intro track. It's all the way here in the back, and that is this pickup going through the volume, right? The volume affects it, and going straight to the jack. All right, it goes straight through. The tone knob has no effect. So that's option one. Option two is the same pickup. Obviously, there's no other choices. Same pickup, but now the tone pot actually works. But now this is more like what we've come to know and love from a Telecaster. All the way off. So if that's too bright for people, a lot of people like this option because they can back that off just a little bit, and it gets just a little bit warmer, right? Now, The most interesting and the least useful of the three is up here, where typically in a Telecaster you would have a neck pickup. But we don't have a neck pickup, do we? But in the wiring, on this switch, there is a resistor and a capacitor, which changes up the voltage and it makes it a darker sound. It's not a pleasant sound. It's not a super jazzy or whatever. Okay, it's just not. From what I've read, Leo Fender gave this as an option because if you were in the 50s and you wanted that bassier sound, maybe you didn't have a bass, or a lot of jazz guys like just, you know, some jazz guitars only have a neck pickup. They like the darker sound. It just does what they want to do. You could have this guitar and somewhat mimic that. I mean, it'll kind of do things, you know. But it's not great. But it does shine, in my opinion, at these other two. The typical Tele, where this actually affects it. But the one that I really like is right here on the back, where you don't have to worry about any of it. Just control your volume and just go. Alright everybody, so that does it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something about maybe something you didn't know. That's when you learn something, right? You didn't know it in the first place. As always, please consider subscribing, and thank you so much to everyone that already has. And if you're on this journey with me already, while you're down there subscribing, go ahead and just hit that like button, right? It's right there. It's very convenient. It's awesome. Helps the algorithm, lets more people see this video, and it just makes my day. It just makes it. Anyway, stay tuned, and I will see you next time.